Welcome to the next instalment of my Big Tips on the Big Board series. Now today's big communication tip is looking at ways to engage our audience when we're presenting to others on screen specifically. However, a lot of the techniques could apply to when we're finally getting back to in-person presentations as well. So it's about communicating in a way that engages our audience and uses different techniques to keep them focused on us when we're on screen presenting to other people. And to do that this week, I'm enlisting the help of another music artist. His name is will.i.am. So this is the music artist we are using this week, excuse my writing, but the reason why I'm drawing on will.i.am is because there are 7 ways that I want to show you to engage your audience with your presentations. I love that I just had to double check how many letters are in his name, but there is 7 ways that we're going to look at. The first one, the W, is to use the whiteboard. Now, by whiteboard, if I can stretch that far, I don't mean the big whiteboard here, although that might be an option. It's great fun. I mean the whiteboard that you get online in these video conferencing software. Often, most will have some sort of interactive whiteboard. And I love this because it's a different way to get your audience engaged, especially if you're kind of putting the feelers out there. How are they feeling? How are they finding the session? One word to describe different things. You can pop the whiteboard up and they can actually draw and annotate on the board as well. It's just something a bit different rather than your sort of bog standard chat messages as well. So the first one is to try to use the whiteboard where possible and where relevant. The next one, the I, is to interact with your audience as much as possible. Now, of course, a lot of these tips depends on the type of presentation that you're doing and how you're communicating with your audience. But try to interact with them wherever you can. Because in person, you might be taking a straw poll of the audience, getting them to raise their hands, shouting out some answers. Online, really think about using the chat to the best effect. That's probably the easiest way to interact with the audience, inviting them to pop into the chat, comments and questions throughout, so you can really keep them engaged as well. The next one, which is the first L, is to listen to your audience. And this might sound a little bit strange because you think on video, often we ask everyone to mute themselves so it's a nice, smooth delivery for yourself and they can engage on the chat. But listen to what they're saying. Take notice of what they're saying on the chat. If it's questions that are coming through, try to acknowledge them. Comments, make sure you're pointing those out as well, because it makes sure that you as the presenter are still keeping up with what they're saying, but you're also bouncing off of what they're saying to you as well. So listen to the audience, gauge where they're at with the presentation, and often that is about kind of checking in on how they are. So listen to them and what their thoughts are throughout your presentation. The second L is quite literally a funny one. All I'm going to put there is LOL. And this is about bringing humour into our presentations and our communication. Now, I have done a video on humour and looking at the fact that it could go really well or it could go really badly, depending on how we approach it. But try to find ways that might lighten the mood a little bit in the virtual space, especially when you are presenting to an audience. It can often feel quite one way that we're presenting, and we want our audience to feel as relaxed as possible. So think of ways that we could lighten the mood a little bit, and maybe that is bringing in humour in some way, but it needs to be a way that works for you. Now, the next tip actually relates to that and might give you an insight into how you could use humour as well, and that's the use of images. Often when we're presenting, we might have slides that we share our screen and we present on there as well. It's the same as in person. No one likes to see boring slides. No one just wants to see a list of bullet points and essentially read what we're going to say. Think about how you can visually engage your audience with your presentation. And linking to the other one, in terms of bringing humour, maybe it's some use of images that might, again, bring a bit of a funny aspect to your presentation, lighten that mood, and get your audience as relaxed as possible. But visually engaging our audience is super important to try to capture and keep their attention. Especially if it's quite a long presentation that we've got them for, we need to keep them engaged. So images is a great way of doing that as well. The next one, if I'm keeping track of where we're at, the A, is to consider any activities that you could bring in to your presentations that might break up the presentation a little bit. Again, re-engaging our audience, keeping them on their toes a little bit, because they might just be sitting there checking their emails. We don't know what people are doing these days when it's all virtual. So throw in an activity now and again. Yes, it keeps them on their toes, but it keeps them engaged as well. This could be icebreaker activities. So at the start of a presentation, you might want to do a bit of an icebreaker. Depends if the audience know each other or not. But either way, trying to do something that gets them engaged. You might use breakout rooms for something. Depends on the purpose of the presentation. But just think of what activities might help to keep your audience engaged throughout. And the final one, again, kind of linking to the previous one as well, is one tool in particular, but there are obviously others out there. But just to give an example of the platforms you could use that are slightly different, it changes the dynamic a bit, and also could be some of these activities that you're thinking about. So Menti is a platform that you might have heard of before. The reason why I like it is because there are a lot of different things that you can do with the platform. They have something called a word cloud, and I love this because it gives a really nice visual representation of things that you ask your audience to type in to the Mentimeter that you send them. It might be, for example, at the end of a presentation, 3 words to describe how you found it, 3 things that you're taking away from the session, and it all comes up on the screen in a really nice visual way. You can also do things like surveys and polls and other interactive activities through that. But as I say, there are other platforms out there. This is just one as an example of how you could engage your audience throughout your presentation. So there it is. That's the big communication tip today. 7 ways of engaging our audience, mainly through video presentations, but some of these tips you could still take into the physical space as well when we're back there. Let's recap. So will.i.am has helped us do this today. We've got the whiteboard, we've got interacting with our audience, especially on the chat. You've got listening to the audience, really bounce off of what they're saying and keep that momentum going. LOL, quite literally bringing humour where we can and where it's relevant. Images, keeping it visual because it's going to make a huge difference rather than just keeping it quite boring and just words on a screen. Activities where you can, and maybe using platforms like Menti. There it is. will.i.am has helped us do the communication tip today. I hope you found that useful. If you found this video useful, check out even more ways to upgrade your impact by subscribing to my YouTube channel.